Hello, I'm Brian Price, author of Crime Writing, How to Write the Science, and in this video I'll give authors tips on how their villains can dispose of bodies. Now, a dead body is quite a heavy, cumbersome thing, especially as the average weight of people is going up these days, so getting rid of it is by no means an easy task. Certainly rolling it up in a carpet and carrying it down to the lift, which you sometimes see in films and the like, is not really an option unless you've got the strength of someone like Lee Charles Jack Reacher. So you have to do something with it. And obviously one of the things people do try and do is to dismember it. Now the problem with that is it takes three things which are not necessarily readily available. The first is tools. You need to have the right sort of equipment. Secondly, you need to have the skill, where to cut, what to do and so on. And thirdly, you need a very strong stomach because it's a very messy and smelly process. And of course, once you do that sort of thing, you find that you're spreading traces all over the place, and sooner or later someone's likely to pick up DNA or blood or some other evidence of what you've been doing. But let's assume you've got a way of, first of all, moving the body, whether it's dismembered or not. How are you going to get rid of it? Well, burial is obviously a common option. The only problem about that is that digging a grave and digging one deep enough to accommodate a body and keep it there without being detected for any length of time is very hard work, and it takes a long time. You'd be very lucky if you found deep enough soil which you could just dig into and shovel away. Most likely you'd come across stones and other things which make the job a lot harder. Furthermore, if you try and do it in a woodland, you've got tree roots stretching all over the place, so it's not a question of popping down to the woods today and digging a hole. It's a very long and arduous process. Of course, once you've got the body in the ground, in the woodland or wherever, there is evidence to show that it's there. Firstly, when you dig out the soil, you've got a lot which won't go back in the hole because there's a body in there. When you do level it off a few months later, you'll find that it's all slumped because the body will have decomposed and earth would have fallen into the gap left behind. Other evidence which might be there where a body's been buried is the evidence of animals who can dig it up. Badgers can dig quite deeply. Foxes might be interested too. Even dog walkers, the ubiquitous dog walkers, may come across something which their animals have excavated. And the plants which grow on top of a recently disturbed piece of ground, especially one with a rich source of nourishment like a corpse underneath it, will be different from the plants which are growing elsewhere in that same patch of woodland or wherever it is you've put the body. So burial, yes, it can be done. Hard work. You need to have plenty of time where you're undisturbed and plenty of energy to do it. What about other means of getting rid of a body? Well, you could put it in a river, as long as it's not going to get washed up on the banks and be discovered by the local canoeing club. You could drop it at sea, which is quite a successful option if you've got access to a boat, which obviously Dexter in the TV series did have, but most people don't. And of course, as long as you don't do it in an area where a fishing vessel's likely to drag it up, which would be very awkward. Dropping it in a lake is less likely to be successful because people do go diving and swimming in lakes, and it could well turn up again and again. You've not got rid of it properly. So what about other means of disposal? Burning it? Well, a crematorium operates at a very high temperature. It takes a fair while to dispose of the corpse, and furthermore, there are bones left which have to be granulated and disposed of in a suitably respectful manner afterwards. If you're trying to burn a body on a bonfire, basically it's not going to work very well. Apart from the horrendous smell it will cause, and bear in mind that Dennis Nielsen, the serial killer, put tyres on top of a bonfire where he was trying to burn body parts in order to hide the smell, you're not going to get the high temperatures needed. Even if you pour petrol or gasoline in the States over the thing, you're not going to get rid of it very effectively. And you may well find, if your object is to prevent identification, that someone can still get a small amount of DNA from the depth of a bone, which could prove useful in identification. So burning's not very good. Dumping at sea, dumping in rivers, lakes, not very good. But you could try chemical disposal. And of course that has been practiced in the past. The acid bath killer Haig in the 1940s was disposing of his victims in sulfuric acid, which is concentrated sulfuric acid like that. There are a couple of problems with that. Firstly, acid is not as completely effective at getting rid of bodies as you might think. It'll dissolve bones, it'll dissolve flesh, but it's pretty poor at dissolving fat. And one of the reasons Haig was caught is because somebody noticed deposits of fat which he'd strewed on the ground after he'd got rid of the rest of the body. Also a presence of a gallstone spotted by a pathologist gave the game away, and he was convicted and hanged. If acids aren't very good, well, what about strong alkalis? Well, yes, something like this, caustic soda, is very effective at getting rid of flesh and fats. Not so good at getting rid of bones, but it does make the bones very crumbly. So you could, once you've dissolved somebody in caustic soda, grind up the bones or crumble them up and get rid of them in a less obvious way. Don't go for things like hydrofluoric acid, though, which you may have seen in Breaking Bad. It's an extremely toxic substance and you can't get hold of it in large quantities. The same goes actually for concentrated sulfuric acid. In the UK, you can't get hold of the stuff without a license, and no one's going to give you a license to get such a large quantity as you'd need for disposing of a body. So those are some points which you might like to bear in mind when your protagonist is trying to get rid of a body. In many cases, if not most of them, there will be traces left. They'll turn up eventually, maybe leading to identification, maybe showing evidence as to how that person was killed. And what happens after that, of course, is the author's job. Thank you for listening.